I went and watched a movie called The Other. This movie was a very popular movie in 1972. It was written by someone that we have talked about on the podcast, Tom Tryon.
Okay.
Tom Tryon starred in I Married a Monster from Outer Space. He was the closeted gay actor that eventually got sick of Hollywood and decided to start writing novels. This was his first novel, and it was a runaway bestseller.
Okay.
The second one was Harvest Home, which I believe I've talked about in a past genre week. Anyway, this movie, have you ever seen it? I had never seen it.
Okay. I have not.
It's got a very unique spoiler twist that I will reveal since the movie is over 50 years old. But it was directed by... It was directed by a guy named Robert Mulligan. I immediately confused him with Richard Mulligan, the guy from Soap, but it is not. That is Richard Mulligan. This is Robert Mulligan. This guy was nominated for a Best Director for doing To Kill a Mockingbird. It stars Uta Hagen, who was a stage actress from Germany. Diana Muldaur, remember her?
Oh, yeah.
The twins were played by Chris and Martin Udvarnarki. I think they were German too. And it also stars a very young Victor French, who you may remember from Little House on the Prairie.
Yes.
And a very young John Ritter, who you may remember from Three's Company.
Okay.
Though it was really popular at the time, Tryon was very disappointed with the result in this movie. He had high hopes of casting Ingrid Bergman as the grandmother. That didn't happen. He wanted Mark Lester for the twins. That's Mark Lester's the kid that played Oliver in the movie Oliver. The synopsis is in the summer of 1935, 12-year-old twins Niles and Holland Perry live with their family on a Connecticut farm. Their loving grandmother, Ada, has taught them something called the game. A number of accidents began happening, and it seems to Niles that Holland is responsible. It is Ada who begins to see the truth, and she is the only one that can stop this murderous game. Do you remember the big twist of this movie? Do you remember anything about this movie?
No, I remember nothing about this movie.
I'm totally shocked. Okay, well, it turns out that Niles is both Niles and Holland because Holland is dead. Holland was killed. And Niles is a little psychopath like that girl in the bad seat. And he's also clairvoyant, and that's where the game comes in. And the grandmother can communicate with him via this game. She ends up figuring out what's going on, and she ends up taking her own life as well as his. He ends up killing a baby that was John Ritter and his wife's.
Sometimes you have to kill the babies.
It's sorry if I'm giving away too many spoilers. This movie scores 83% on Rotten Tomatoes, and honestly, other than it being a bit dated, and it is very dated for today's standards, I think it's a well-deserved 83. It has some truly terrifying moments in it.
I think we're going to have to revisit the nomenclature of dated, and maybe classify it like we do theater, where we say it's a period piece.
And
if you accept it for the time when it was made and what it is, to me, that's not dated. That's the best they were doing back then. Sometimes you and I will refer to dated meaning, it covers subject matter, or it has characters, or it has references that probably wouldn't be socially acceptable now based on new norms. But we need, I think, a different word for that. We, especially on this show, appreciate the dated cinema of the past for what it was,
Absolutely.
Frankenstein for when it was released, The Omen for when it was released.
Well, what I meant with dated is it is a period piece, but it was filmed in the early 70s. So some of the production values are a little lacking.
Yeah.
That's what I meant.
Okay. And that makes sense. We talked, I think it wasn't last week, but it was another week about, the film we were covering, looked like it was a TV movie because of the cheaper sets and the cheaper budget and everything else. Interesting. Okay. Well, now that you've got me intrigued, I might actually have to check that one out.
It had been on my list for a long time. I think you remember I talked about watching The Dark Secret of Harvest Home, which was like a 2-night mini-series with Betty Davis not too long ago, and it was terrible. But they're both books that were runaway bestsellers by Tom Tryon in the 70s. So.
Start the car, Johnny has the keys.